The church learns more from the world, the culture, the society, than it does the Word of God. That's our standard. The world, the culture, the society, it's a bunch of niceties today, which so angers me. Oh, look how beautiful you looked. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but people are doing atrocious things, and you don't want to be the bad guy and the mean guy and say something, because it might cost you something, and people will reject you for it. In Ephesians, it's speaking the truth in love.
Yeah.
So yeah, you should be broken and you should be crying about it, okay? But we need to speak the truth and warn people, because guess what? Most of the church is going to hell. We're going to finish up on the Year of Jubilee, which is the whole key to the return of Christ. Now, before that, I'm going to say, as far as these end times, remember Daniel 12, 9 and 10. And the angel said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the end time of the end." All right? "Many will be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly." So don't expect the bad times to turn people around. It didn't happen in the book of Revelation, and it doesn't necessarily happen here. That's kind of what we're looking for, right? They're going to wake up. Actually, if you have a hard heart and the sun beats down on it, what does it do? Makes it harder. Okay? Now, God is still gracious, and I don't think it's just an absolute statement, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, which is why when you talk to people and you try to warn them, and they tell you, oh, it goes up and down, and they can't see. You know why many Christians cannot understand what's going on? It's because they don't have a prophetic time clock. They don't understand prophecy. And that prophetic time clock tells us, whoops, we're right here in the apostasy, and then right there, 10 days before the trib is the rapture, and we're real close. Kind of like saying it's September 15th or something, okay, of this next year. So, also it says in James 5:8, listen to this, "Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand." Establish, that's a Greek word that means to make firm, to make hard, to set into place, to make it immovable. And this is the time right now, the time for Jesus to return is very close, and God tells us we need to establish our hearts, make it rock solid, okay? Don't be thrown about by every wind and wave of doctrine, or don't be tossed about by every event that happens, okay? We need to strengthen our faith. Now, here's an interesting thing I ran across. Remember the spirit of Jezebel and why I said it was worse? Listen to this parable. It's actually not a parable. It's a true story that Jesus told. When an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Okay? Then he says, "I will return to my house," or the man that he was possessing, "from which I came, and when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order." So reformation, the demons cast out, the guy reforms his life, but he's missing one thing. What is it? Jesus, the Holy Spirit, right? Then the Spirit goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of the man is worse than the first. And the funny thing is, he's not talking about men being demon possessed. Here's what he says: "So shall it also be with this wicked generation." He's talking about a whole generation of people. So in other words, that spirit comes back and it's 8 times worse. So to one spirit, you have 7 other spirits more wicked, and it's 8 times worse. And that's why the spirit of Jezebel is happening now. That's why people are falling away, and that's why we're in the midst of the great apostasy. Now, here's the final decision time. There's 2 pillars it talks about. And you're going to be one or the other. Here's the first pillar. Here's Jesus' ominous warning. This is Luke 32. Oh, shoot, I didn't put the chapter down. I think it's 17, 32, 33. He says, "Remember Lot's wife." Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life will preserve it. And that's the time we're in, more than ever. If you're just here to save your life, you're going to lose it because you're not really of God. If you're here to lose your life for Christ's sake, and that doesn't mean purposely dying, that means living for him, giving yourself to others, then you're going to save it. Okay? What happened to Lot's wife?
She turned around and looked.
Yeah, that's her pillar, right? It's a pillar of what? Judgment. So that's what we got. That's a pillar of judgment because she looked back at her old way of life, the world, the American dream, all that stuff, and she was judged. She became a pillar. All right. The other one is of honor. Okay, and this is Revelation 3:12. This is to the church of Philadelphia. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. Okay, so this is the time, seriously, you're going to become one of two pillars right there. The pillar of judgment by looking back at the world, longing for the old way of life. Once you put your hand to the plow, you are not to look back at all. You go straight forward, and right now, that's where a lot of people are turning back because they never truly made that commitment to God. The year of Jubilee, 3 things happened. What were the 3 things? Because it's a typology of something. When we have the mark of the beast in Revelation 13, everybody is going to be up to their eyeballs in debt to who? The Antichrist. And when Jesus returns, he wipes out that system. So all debts are forgiven. All right. And then number 2, we're going to be a planet of slaves. And Daniel 11 talks about the Antichrist is going to do whatever he pleases. Nobody can stop him. He's going to have complete ownership and control over you. But when Jesus returns, what happens?
But it don't say you mean the earth dwellers.
The earth dwellers. That's right. You will be set free from, the earth dwellers will be set free from being slaves, right? And then the last part is the land returns back to its original owner. Matthew 24:15. What happens there? Yes. When you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, you who are in Judea flee to the mountains. The Jews are kicked out exactly at mid-trib, out of the land, okay, which is Satan's one of those big things, because the land was given to the Jews, and he has tried, and he was successful from 70 AD to 1948. He got the Jews out of the land, but God brought him back, okay? And when he comes back, the Jews get back the land. So we see that typology, and the ancient rabbis saw that too, and according to them, the Messiah, the Mashiach, would return in the year of Jubilee. That's what they say. Now, they think it's the first coming. They just don't know it's his second visit. Okay? So they realized that there was that typology and that he would come back in the year of Jubilee. All right. So that's why, if I could ask God one question, I would simply ask him, when is the year of Jubilee? But fortunately, I already know the answer. So I will tell you that later on, not tonight, because I don't think I'm going to get that far. But there's a way to trace it, like I say, that I've never seen done before. So how long is the Shemitah cycle?
7 years.
7 years. That's the whole cycle itself. Deuteronomy 15:1, he says, every 7th year shall be a Shemitah for you, or a releasing. Okay? And so the 7th year is the Shemitah, the 7 years, the Shemitah cycle. It's a week. It's just like 6 days you work, 7th day you rest. 6 years you work, 7th year you rest the land. And so after 7 cycles of that, which is 49 years, right there, is the year of Yovel. So every 50th year. Okay? That's where it ends up, which is why I'm going to tell you, I think right there is where we are at in the cycle right now. We're in the Shemitah year of the 6th cycle. The next Rosh Hashanah will start this off. The last 7 years, or the last Shemitah cycle, which is the tribulation.
Which is also the 70th week of Daniel.
Yes, that's a better name to call it. The tribulations is the 70th week. We call it the 7-year trib. The 70th week of Daniel, okay? And then the new year to begin right here would be the year of Jubilee. So we're in the 6th Shemitah cycle. We're right here, the 7th year. And then at Rosh Hashanah right there, we're raptured. And then right there begins the next 7 years. And then I'm counting on this being the year of Jubilee, which is 2030, which I'm not just going to say that randomly. I'm going to give you like about 5 or 6 evidences I've never seen before elsewhere, which is going to blow your mind, where these dates suspiciously add up and point to 2030. I mean, I'm serious. It's like, what? Yeah, they point to 2030. So we'll see that, and you can take it or leave it. I don't know the exact cycles. I'm just saying based upon some of that stuff. But we know it's close, right?
Yes.
We know it's close. Okay. So now here's something interesting too. The year of Jubilee is the only year in the Jewish calendar that begins in the 7th month. Okay. On the first day, right? That is what? Trumpets or Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year's, right? That's the first day, right there. Every year begins on trumpets the first day of the 7th month, except for 1 year, which is, come on.
Year of Jubilee.
The year of Jubilee. When does that begin? That's the only one that begins differently.
I don't know. 40.
What's the next feast? What's the next feast? Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement, the 10th. I'm going to go over this several times. It actually begins right here on the 10th day, and that's Day of Atonement right there. The year of Jubilee begins on that. Do you know why it has to begin on that? Because we're raptured here, but that doesn't begin the tribulation period, does it? The Day of Atonement does. The 10th, which means for it to be exactly 7 years, that Jesus has to return on the 10th. And that happens to be New Year's Day.
Why is it only on the Jubilee that has to be?
No one knows why. No one knows why, except that it fits this picture perfectly. Now that, I'm going to have to really go over that several times. Okay? So it begins on the 10th, on the Day of Atonement, and it ends on the Day of Atonement, which happens to be 7 years later, the year of Jubilee. And that would be the New Year's. And he returns to the sound of a great horn in Matthew 24. And you know what that horn is? It's the shofar that brings in the year of Jubilee. Yes, exactly. So if you understand all that and you put it together, it starts to make sense. Okay, and again, that's something we just have to go over again and again, because I know someone's like, what's this 10th day of the 7th, Day of Atonement? But we'll get it. I want to talk about the Millennial Sabbath belief. Okay? The Millennial Sabbath belief. This is really interesting right here. So Millennial Sabbath belief. Here's what it says. This is basically in the Epistle of Barnabas, which is not obviously scripture. And no, it's not in the Catholic Bible either. But it's an early Christian writing. Now, first in Psalms 90, verse 4, it says this. For 1,000 years in your sight is but yesterday when it is past as a watch in the night. Peter quotes that in 2 Peter 3 and 4. Knowing this, there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lust and saying, where's the promise of his coming? That's the mockers. Unfortunately, we have a lot within the church walls, which kind of disappoints me. For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continued as they were from the beginning of creation. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that a day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. Notice he does that equation, one day equals 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, in reference to the return of Jesus, which is kind of interesting. Now listen to this. So you see that in contrived. This is an exact quote from the Epistle of Barnabas, written around anytime from 70 AD to say 132 AD. It says this: and God made the works of his hands in 6 days, and finished on the seventh day, and rested on it, and sanctified it. Observe, children, what he finished in 6 days means. It means that in 6,000 years, the Lord will bring everything to an end. For with him, a day signifies 1,000 years. And he himself bears me witness when he says, behold, the day of the Lord will be as 1,000 years, talking about the Psalms. Therefore, children, in 6 days, that is in 6,000 years, everything will be brought to an end. And he rested on the seventh day. This means when his son comes, the second return, he will destroy the time of the lawless one. All right. And judge the ungodly, and will change the sun and the moon and the stars. And he will truly rest on the seventh day. So you see what he just said? In 6,000 years, okay, and right here, they knew it was a 7-year trib. He was going to come right here in the second coming, and he would destroy the lawless one. So he's saying from the beginning of time, all the way to the end of the tribulation is exactly 6,000 years. They knew when the church started, so he was saying the church would last 2,000 years minus 7, which is what we're heading for next year. Okay, basically. You guys ready? So 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, another 2,000 from Abraham to Jesus, another 2,000 from Jesus to the end of the tribulation period. And then the seventh 1,000 year, which is the rest, is what? Millennial kingdom, right. The millennial kingdom, that's the seventh 1,000 year. And that is the millennial sabbatical rest. So they saw a pattern: 6 days man would labor, seventh day he would rest. 6,000 years man would labor, and then the seventh 1,000 year would be the millennial kingdom. Does that make sense? Okay, kind of astounding for writing that almost 2,000 years ago, don't you think? Yeah, I think that's real astounding. Okay, and I had mentioned before, in their own writings, I'm not going to quote all this, the rabbis believe this, that Jesus would return the year after the end of a Shemitah. There's the end of the Shemitah. That's exactly where Jesus is going to return. That's what they believe. He would bring in a new Shemitah cycle, which would be the Year of Jubilee. All right. So let me put some passages together here, and then we can go into question and answer time. Isaiah 27:13. Isaiah 27:13 says this: and it shall come to pass in that day that a great trumpet, or a great shofar, shall be blown, and they shall come which were made ready to perish in the land of Assyria, and the outcasts of the land of Egypt shall worship the Lord in the holy mountain at Jerusalem. Okay? A great shofar will be blown, which is a signal for Israel to return to worship God in the Messianic kingdom. It is only after it is blown that Israel returns to the land. So according to Isaiah, that great shofar is going to be blown, and then Israel would be rescued. Now, Matthew 24:31, talking about Jesus returning. He shall send his angels with the sound of a great trumpet. They shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So basically, at this point, a great trumpet's going to sound, a great shofar, and that's the return of Jesus. All right? Now, according to Mark Biltz, the first trumpet is known as Pentecost, which makes sense. That's the first trumpet that started the church. The last trumpet, that's 1 Corinthians 15:51, is the rapture, and then the great trumpet is the Day of Atonement, which is when he's going to return. So the Jews call the great trumpet the Day of Atonement, which when we put the feast together, that's the day that Jesus returns. It's just like for 490 years before the Babylonian captivity, they didn't even do the Shemitah, which is every seventh year you get off. You don't have to, harvest the land, and God will bless it in such a way that you have enough food. I know. I know it. Exactly. I think they were thinking in the natural, thinking, if I don't plant this seventh year, then I'm going to lose money. You know how you kind of figure things in the natural? Instead of having faith in God and just doing his program. So I think it was a lack of faith in God that he would deliver. The Levitical law in the Torah that was only given to his people. These are blessings, basically, that will only come upon his people.
Through obedience.
Yes. Now, other pagan people, they had their conscience, according to Romans 1, that as they followed that, the law written on their hearts, then yeah, God could bless them. With something specific like that, they wouldn't have that. It would be more like don't murder, don't lie, stuff like that. Okay? So they disobeyed it. I'm thinking like you, why would you not take a whole year off? And when you figure it, think of it this way. We gosh, I had to work 6 days a week and we get 2 days off. Actually, if you take off the whole seventh year and you have every seventh day off, that is 2 days a week you get off. So it wasn't, so for God's people and for most of the pagan lands, you made your slaves and animals work 7 days a week. You didn't get any days off. So God was pretty lenient, when you consider his program. I think it's now a preparatory time. And even though the typology is the Jews get inside the ark, which is Christ, probably 144,000 and making it through the trib, which is the flood. Yeah, you could look at it and say, yeah, it's a preparatory time. You see what's coming and you prepare. Yes.
We are running short of time to be ready. Get ready.
Yes, the time gets shorter every day.
Yes, every day is getting shorter and shorter. And
it really is. I just know that I woke up 3 weekends ago. It's like, it's like I had little things along the way. It's like, I got to prepare. I don't know why. And I'm not saying, that was from God. I just all of a sudden it just hit me that I got to start getting this stuff now.
No, that wasn't from just hitting you. That was God.
It probably was. It can fall any time. The ant looks ahead. We see Joseph in Egypt. We see all these examples. And again, this God will take care of me. I don't want to comment on that one. I think he's taking care of you by warning you.
Why would God warn you? Why does he tell us about these things that are going to
all of it, yeah. So we could prepare. We can do the appropriate actions. It's just like it says, God feeds the birds of the air, right? Do they just open their beaks and worms drop in from heaven? Is that how he takes care of them? No. They actually go out and they hunt and scavenge, right? That's how he feeds them. Is he gives them an able body, he gives them the resources, and then they go out and get what they need. That's how he prepares. And that's the same way he's going to prepare for us. Okay? So I think everybody in here looking around, I think everybody pretty much has prepared some. But remember one thing is that people are going to show up at your door. And they're going to want you to take them in.
Yes.
Yeah, for toilet paper. But you're going to probably be providing for more than yourself. So you got to think in all those kind of terms. And do you really want to turn away people, that are actually sincere and didn't know